He thought he was adopting an aggressive German shepherd, but what happened next was incredible. His growls shattered the silence one humid night, a jagged sound that tore through the rusted kennels of a crumbling shelter perched on the edge of a Tennessee hollow. For months, the German shepherd's voice had been a storm unto itself. Deep, guttural, a warning that sent shivers down the spines of anyone who dared linger too long. The shelter, a forgotten outpost swallowed by kudzu and shadow, hummed with the tension of his presence. Volunteers whispered his name, Cade, like a curse, their boots scuffing the cracked concrete as they avoided his cage. Aggressive? They'd labeled him. A beast too wild to tame, too broken to love. But that night, the growls stopped. The air went still, heavy with the scent of rain and something darker. He was gone. Panic erupted like wildfire. The staff stumbled through the rows, flashlights slicing the dark, their shouts swallowed by the wind whipping down the valley. Cade's kennel door hung open, its lock twisted and bent, claw marks gouged into the metal. Muddy paw prints streaked toward the forest beyond, vanishing where the trees clawed at the sky. Had he escaped? Been stolen? No one knew, but the mystery clawed at their hearts. Across the hollow, miles away, Ethan Cole jolted awake in his weathered cabin, sweat beading on his brow. A former Marine K-9 handler, he'd come to the shelter that day, drawn by a file no one else would touch. Cade's amber eyes had met his through the bars, fierce, unyielding, and Ethan had felt it. A pull, a dare, a question he couldn't answer. Now, thunder rumbled, shaking the cabin's bones, and he staggered to the window. Lightning cracked, illuminating the yard. A shadow loomed, massive, soaked, unmistakable. Cade stood there, rain streaming off his scarred coat, staring up at Ethan with a gaze that burned through the storm. Beside him, something gleamed in the dark, a flicker of hope no one could have seen coming. Rain hammered the tin roof of Ethan Cole's cabin, a relentless tattoo that drowned the hollow's usual quiet. Tucked deep in the Tennessee hills, the one-room refuge stood weathered but defiant, its cedar walls stained dark by years of storms. Inside, a single lantern cast trembling shadows across the plank floor, the glow catching on a faded marine patch pinned above the hearth. Outside, the night pressed close, thick with the musk of wet pine and the electric hum of a brewing tempest. Ethan stood by the window, his breath fogging the warped glass, his broad shoulders tense beneath a flannel shirt. The silence of civilian life had gnawed at him for months, a void no rifle or mission could fill. He'd come here to escape, but tonight something had found him. The forest beyond the yard loomed like a living thing, its gnarled branches swaying in the wind, clawing at the sky. Cade's sudden appearance, rain-slicked, massive, unyielding, sent a jolt through Ethan's chest. The German shepherd's scarred coat glistened under the storm's flashes, his amber eyes locked on the cabin with an intensity that felt alive. Beside him, a glint flickered, a rusted tag dangling from his collar, catching the lantern's faint spill through the glass. Ethan's calloused hands tightened on the sill, unease curling in his gut. He'd seen that look before in war dogs pacing the edge of chaos, but this was different. This was personal. Thunder rolled, low and menacing, shaking the floorboards. Ethan's gaze darted to the porch, where an old leather leash hung on a nail, its edges frayed from a life left behind. He hadn't signed Cade's papers yet, hadn't even decided, but now the dog was here, miles from the shelter, standing like a sentinel in the downpour. His heart thudded, a mix of dread and yearning he couldn't name. The storm raged on, but beyond its fury, a warmth flickered, a promise that whatever Cade had brought with him might just mend the cracks Ethan didn't know he carried. Ethan Cole was 36, a man carved by war and softened by its echoes. A former Marine K-9 handler, he'd spent years in dust-choked deserts, guiding dogs through chaos, loyal shadows who'd leap into fire on his word. But the silence of Tennessee's hills hit harder than any blast. 3 years ago, he'd traded his uniform for solitude, retreating to a cabin where the only sounds were the wind and his own restless thoughts. The quiet was a thief, stealing sleep, leaving him hollow. He'd lost his last dog, a Malinois named Jax, to a roadside bomb overseas, a wound that never scarred over. Adopting again felt like betrayal, until he saw Cade's file, aggressive, unadoptable. Ethan wondered if a dog like that might understand the jagged pieces he carried. Cade was a German shepherd, broad and battle-worn, his black and tan coat patchy from neglect. 5 years old, maybe 6, he'd landed at the shelter as a stray, snarling, scarred, a torn ear drooping like a flag of surrender. The staff called him a lost cause, his growls a wall no one could breach. Yet there was a quirk. He'd sit statue still when people passed, amber eyes tracking them with a focus that wasn't rage. It was something deeper, something caged. His file hinted at a past, found near a torched trailer, pacing as if guarding ghosts, but the details were ash. Ethan had stood by his kennel that morning, feeling those eyes bore into him, a challenge he couldn't shake. He'd left without signing, but Cade's gaze clung to him like smoke. Now, Cade stood in Ethan's yard, rain streaming off his frame, a living storm of his own. His presence was a mystery. How had he escaped? How had he found this cabin, miles from the shelter, through a tempest that blinded the stars? Ethan watched him, heart pounding. Cade's eyes held secrets he couldn't read. Pain? Maybe? Or a promise buried beneath the scars. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch, just stared, steady and unyielding. Ethan wondered if he'd ever trust again, if those years of isolation had hardened him beyond reach. But that glinting tag, swaying in the wind, whispered of a story untold. Lightning split the sky, and Cade's ears flicked, his body tensing. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under his boots. Something rustled in the dark beyond the yard. A shadow, a sound, and Cade's head snapped toward it, a low rumble building in his throat. Whatever he'd brought here, it wasn't finished. Rain lashed the cabin's windows as Ethan Cole stepped onto the porch, the damp air thick with the scent of earth and pine. Cade stood rigid in the yard, his scarred coat gleaming under the storm's electric flashes, amber eyes fixed on the forest's edge. The German shepherd's escape from the shelter, miles away, through a night that swallowed sound, was no accident. Ethan's gut churned. He'd seen that focus before, in dogs sniffing out danger, and now it stared back at him from a beast he hadn't even claimed. Thunder growled, and Cade's ears flattened, a low rumble escaping his throat. Something was out there, and it had followed him here. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from the porch hook, its beams slicing through the downpour. "Stay," he said, voice steady. But Cade ignored him, stepping forward, hackles raised. The muddy paw prints trailing from the yard into the trees glowed under the light. Too deliberate, too fresh. Ethan's mind raced. The shelter had called him an hour ago. Frantic. Cade's kennel was wrecked, the gate forced open, claw marks everywhere. They'd assumed he'd bolted, but this wasn't a flight. This was a pursuit. Ethan followed the tracks, boots sinking into the sodden ground, Cade at his side like a shadow stitched to his own. The stakes were clear. If he lost Cade now, whatever had driven the dog here might claim him for good. The forest swallowed them, a tangle of dripping branches and snapping twigs. Cade moved with purpose, his torn ear flicking at every rustle, his limp barely slowing him. Ethan's beam caught glints of water pooling in ruts, but no answers. How had Cade found this cabin? The shelter was a blur of faces, dozens of visitors, none tied to Ethan's quiet life. Yet here he was, drawn like a compass to true north. Lightning flared, illuminating a scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush, gray, tattered, stamped with the shelter's faded logo. Ethan's pulse quickened. Cade had carried something with him. But what? He knelt, fingers brushing the cloth, when Cade growled. A deep, guttural warning that vibrated through the mud. Ethan spun, light sweeping the trees. Shadows danced, but one moved wrong, too sharp, too deliberate. A branch snapped, close, and Cade's teeth bared, his body coiling like a spring. Ethan's marine instincts kicked in, hand dropping to the knife at his belt. "Who's there?" he barked, voice cutting through the storm. No answer. just the hiss of rain and Cade's steady growl. The shadow shifted, retreating into the dark, and Ethan's chest tightened. Someone had trailed Cade. Someone who'd broken him free, or worse, someone he'd escaped from. The stakes sharpened. This wasn't just about keeping Cade. It was about surviving whatever hunted him. They pressed deeper, the trail winding past a swollen creek, its current a dull roar. Cade's growls softened, replaced by a tense silence, his nose twitching at the air. Ethan's flashlight flickered, battery fading, and he cursed under his breath. Hours bled into the night, the storm unrelenting. They reached a clearing, pine needles carpeting the ground, a hollowed oak leaning like a broken spine. When Cade stopped, ears perked. A faint whine pierced the wind, high and desperate, not his own. Ethan's beam darted to the underbrush, catching a glint, metal, rusted, half-buried. A trap, its jaws open, gleamed in the mud. Poachers. The word hit like a slug. These hills were riddled with them, preying on strays, and Cade's scars suddenly made sense. He yanked the trap free, tossing it aside, when the whine came again. Closer, layered with fear. Cade bounded forward, Ethan scrambling after him. And there, tangled in vines beneath a fallen log, was a second dog. A scrawny hound, its leg caught in a snare, whimpered as Cade nudged it gently, tail flicking once. Ethan's heart pounded. Cade hadn't just fled. He'd led him here to save another. Hands shaking, Ethan worked the snare, the hound trembling under his touch. "Hold on," he muttered, freeing it just as headlights flared through the trees, twin beams slicing the rain. A truck engine hummed, low and menacing, closing in. Ethan froze, the hound pressing against his leg, Cade's growl rumbling anew. The poachers were back, and they'd seen his light. He had seconds to move. "Go!" he hissed, shoving the hound toward the trees. Cade stood his ground, eyes locked on the approaching threat, buying Ethan time. The truck screeched to a halt, doors slamming, and a gruff voice shouted, "That's him! Get the shepherd!" Ethan bolted, the hound at his heels, but Cade didn't follow. His bark rang out, sharp, commanding, drawing the danger away. Ethan stumbled into a ditch, breath ragged, guilt clawing at him. He couldn't lose Cade, not now, not after this. The headlights faded, shouts swallowed by the storm, and Ethan crept back, flashlight dead. The clearing was empty, Cade gone. The truck's tire tracks gouged into the mud. Panic surged, but then, a faint bark echoed from the creek's far bank. Ethan splashed through the icy water, the hound trailing, and saw paw prints glowing in the silt. Cade was alive, leading him still. Relief crashed over him, but it was short-lived. A new sound cut the night. A metallic clank, heavy and deliberate, not far off. Ethan's blood ran cold. The poachers weren't alone. He followed the prints, the forest thickening, until they reached a crumbling shack, its roof sagging, door ajar. Cade stood there, soaked and steady, growling at the shadows within. Ethan's beam was gone, but moonlight caught the glint of cages stacked inside, faint whines echoing from their depths. This was their lair, a trap for strays like Cade, and he'd brought Ethan straight to it. The hound whimpered, pressing close, and Ethan's resolve hardened. He wasn't just fighting for Cade anymore, he was fighting for them all. But then the midpoint twist struck. A figure stepped from the shack. Not a poacher, but a woman, gaunt and trembling, clutching a rusted chain. Her eyes widened at Cade, then Ethan, and she whispered, "You're not one of them." Her voice cracked, fragile but fierce. "He was mine before they took him." Ethan's mind reeled. Cade's past wasn't just scars. It was a stolen life. Headlights flared again, closer now, and Cade's growl deepened. The woman pointed to the trees. "Run, they're coming." Ethan hesitated, then saw a shadow beyond her. And it wasn't human. Moonlight bled through the storm clouds, casting jagged shadows over the crumbling shack where Ethan Cole stood frozen. Cade's growl rumbled low, his scarred frame taut between Ethan and the gaunt woman clutching a rusted chain. Her words, "He was mine," hung in the air, a fragile thread unraveling Cade's mystery. The scrawny hound whimpered at Ethan's feet, its wiry fur matted with mud, while faint whines echoed from the cages inside the shack. Headlights flared again, slicing through the trees, and the woman's eyes darted wide. "Run!" she rasped, pointing to the forest. Ethan's pulse thundered, but that shadow beyond her, tall, silent, not human, stopped him cold. Cade's ears flicked, his growl softening into a tense huff. Whatever it wasn't the poachers, not yet. Ethan grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her with him. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice sharp over the rain. She stumbled, her bony frame trembling. "Lila," she whispered. "They took him 2 years ago. I've been tracking them." Her gaze locked on Cade, a flicker of recognition softening her fear. Ethan didn't have time to process it. Tires crunched gravel, closer now, and Cade barked, short, urgent, nudging the hound toward the trees. Ethan followed Lila at his heels, the forest swallowing them as the truck's beams swept the shack. Branches clawed at his raincoat, but Cade led the way, his paw prints glowing in the mud, a lifeline through the dark. They ducked into a hollow, the roots of an ancient oak shielding them. Ethan's breath fogged the air, his hand steadying Lila as she sank against the trunk. Cade pressed close, his warmth grounding Ethan's racing heart. The hound curled beside them, trembling less now, its trust a small victory in the chaos. Lila's voice broke the silence, barely audible. His name was Titan, before they chained him. She traced a scar on Cade's flank, her fingers shaking. "I raised him from a pup, then they raided my barn, stole every dog I had." Ethan's jaw clenched. Cade's past wasn't just trauma. It was theft, a life ripped away. A distant bark echoed, faint, familiar, and Ethan's chest tightened. Cade's head snapped up, ears perked, tail flicking once. "He's out there," Ethan muttered, peering through the roots. The headlights dimmed, the engine's hum fading into the storm. Relief flickered, but it was brittle. Lila shook her head. "They won't stop. They sell fighters, bait dogs. Titan, Cade. He got away once before." Her words sank like stones. Cade's escape from the shelter wasn't his first rebellion. It was his second. Ethan stroked Cade's wet fur, feeling the scars beneath, and wondered how much fight was left in him. The bark came again, closer, and Cade surged forward, pulling Ethan from the hollow. Lila and the hound trailed, the forest a blur of snapping twigs and dripping leaves. Paw prints led deeper, winding past a creek where the water churned black and fast. Ethan's boots slipped on the bank, but Cade steadied him, a silent anchor. The sound sharpened. A yelp, cut off mid-breath, and Ethan's blood ran cold. They created a rise, and there, beneath a sagging pine, was another dog, a wiry mutt, its legs snared in a trap, blood staining the mud. Cade nudged it gently, a soft whine escaping his throat. Ethan knelt, hands steady despite the dread coiling in his gut, and pried the trap open. The mutt staggered free, leaning into Cade, another soul saved. For a moment, the night softened. Rain eased to a drizzle, the wind carrying a faint birdsong from the hollow. Ethan exhaled, wiping mud from his hands, while Cade stood watch, his amber eyes scanning the trees. Lila managed a weak smile, stroking the hound's ears. "He's still the same," she murmured, "always protecting." Ethan nodded, a warmth blooming in his chest. Cade wasn't aggressive. He was a guardian, forged by pain into something fiercer than fear. The mutt licked his hand, a small victory, and hope flickered like a flame. Maybe they'd outrun the danger. Maybe this was enough. But misdirection struck hard. A twig snapped, sharp, deliberate, behind them. Cade spun, teeth bared, a growl ripping through the quiet. Ethan's knife flashed into his hand, his marine instincts flaring. The headlights were gone, the truck silent, but something moved in the dark. Boots crunching leaves, a low whistle cutting the air. Lila gasped, clutching the chain like a lifeline. "They're here," she hissed. Ethan's light was dead, but moonlight caught a glint, metal, low to the ground. Another trap? No, a rifle barrel, steady and aimed. The poachers hadn't left. They'd circled back, silent as wolves. Ethan yanked Lila down, the dogs huddling close. Cade's growl deepened, his body a shield between them and the threat. The whistle came again, closer, and a voice rasped through the trees. That shepherd's worth a fortune. Drop him, grab the rest. Ethan's stomach dropped. They weren't just hunting strays. They wanted Cade alive, a prize for their blood-soaked trade. He whispered to Lila, "Stay low," and crept along the rise, Cade at his side. The mutt and hound pressed against her, their trust unshaken. Ethan peered through the pine needles. Two figures hulking in the drizzle, one with a net, the other the rifle. Outnumbered, outgunned, but not outfought, not yet. Cade's ears flattened, his body tensing for a leap, but Ethan held him back. "Wait," he breathed, scanning the dark. A third shadow loomed, taller, broader, near the creek, watching, not moving. The not-human shape from the shack. Ethan's mind raced. Was it help, or worse? The rifleman swung his barrel toward the rise, and Ethan ducked, heart pounding. Cade's warmth steadied him, a silent vow. They'd face this together. The net wielder shouted, "There!" and charged, boots slamming the mud. Ethan braced, knife ready, but Cade's bark exploded, sharp, defiant. Echoing through the hollow, the figures froze, startled, and the third shadow shifted, stepping closer. Danger faded, then surged back. The rifle cracked, a shot splintering the pine above Ethan's head. Lila yelped, the dogs scattering, and Cade lunged, slamming into the net wielder with a snarl. The man toppled, cursing, net tangling his limbs. Ethan bolted forward, tackling the rifleman's legs, the barrel swinging wild. They hit the mud, grappling, until Cade's teeth sank into the man's arm, forcing a scream. The gun skidded free and Ethan pinned him, panting. The third shadow loomed nearer, silent, massive, a bear, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. The poachers froze, terror replacing their greed, and Ethan seized the moment, dragging Lila and the dogs toward the creek. Cade followed, unwavering, as the bear's roar shattered the night behind them. Mud sucked at Ethan Cole's boots as he dragged Lila and the dogs toward the creek. The bear's roar splitting the Tennessee night behind them. Cade's bark still echoed, sharp and defiant, a beacon in the chaos. The poacher's shouts turned to panicked yells as the massive beast charged, its bulk crashing through the underbrush. Ethan's heart pounded, adrenaline surging, but Cade stayed close, his scarred frame a steady shield between them and the unraveling danger. Lila clutched the rusted chain, her gaunt face pale, while the hound and mutt pressed against her legs, trembling but trusting. The rifleman scrambled to his feet, clawing for his gun, but the bear swiped, sending him sprawling into the mud with a scream. The net wielder bolted, abandoning his tangled weapon, and the forest swallowed their retreat. Ethan didn't stop. He splashed into the creek, the icy current biting his knees, pulling Lila and the dogs with him. Cade leapt ahead, his torn ear flicking as he scanned the far bank, amber eyes fierce with purpose. The water churned, fast and unforgiving, but Cade's steady presence guided them across. They surfaced, gasping, on the other side, the bear's roars fading into the storm's howl. Ethan's chest heaved, relief warring with dread. He'd lost sight of the shack, the cages, the poacher's lair. But Cade's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling as headlights flared again, twin beams piercing the trees. The truck hadn't fled. It was circling back, hunting them still. Lila's voice cracked. "They won't let him go, he's too valuable." Ethan's jaw tightened. Cade wasn't just a stray. He was a fighter, a survivor, stolen from Lila and forged in cruelty. The truth hit like a bullet. His aggression was defiance, a refusal to break. Ethan grabbed a fallen branch, wielding it like a club, and whispered, "Stay behind me." Cade stood tall, teeth bared. As the truck screeched to a halt, gravel spraying. Two figures emerged. Not the bear's victims, but reinforcements, burly and armed with a tranq gun and a chain. "That's the one!" one shouted, aiming the dart. Ethan swung the branch, cracking it against the gunman's wrist, but the second lunged, chain swinging toward Cade's neck. Cade dodged, lightning fast, and sank his teeth into the man's leg, dragging him down with a snarl. Ethan tackled the gunman, fists flying, mud slicking their struggle. The dart gun fired wild, thinking into a tree, and Lila screamed, shoving the hound and Mutt deeper into the brush. Ethan pinned the man, knee on his chest, but the chain wielder staggered up, blood streaming, and roared, "You're dead!" He charged, chain raised, until Cade leapt, slamming into his chest, a blur of black and tan. The man hit the ground hard, air whooshing from his lungs, and Cade stood over him, growling, unyielding. Ethan wrestled the gunman's arms behind him, panting, "It's over." But it wasn't. Headlights shifted, blue and red now, pulsing through the trees. Sirens wailed, faint then deafening, and relief crashed over Ethan like a wave. Tires crunched, and officers spilled from a cruiser, beams sweeping the scene. "Drop it!" one barked, and the poachers froze, hands rising as cuffs clicked into place. Ethan stumbled back, Cade pressing against his leg, warm and solid. Lila emerged, the dogs at her heels, her eyes wide with awe. An officer approached, holstered gun glinting. "You the one who called about a missing shepherd?" Ethan nodded, throat tight. "He found me, and them." He gestured to the shack, where whines still echoed from the cages. The officer's jaw dropped, and he radioed for backup, animal control, vets, a full sweep. The truth unfurled as the storm eased, rain softening to a mist. Cade hadn't just escaped the shelter. He'd broken free to lead Ethan here, to dismantle a nightmare. His scars weren't from rage. They were from fighting back, from protecting Lila's pack until he couldn't anymore. Ethan sank to the mud, exhaustion hitting hard, and Cade lay beside him, head resting on his lap. Officers moved swiftly, freeing the caged dogs, 6 in all, thin but alive, while the poachers were hauled away, one muttering, "That damn dog." Ethan smiled, stroking Cade's muzzle. He'd outsmarted them all, a guardian disguised as a threat. Lila knelt, tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "Titan," she whispered, but Cade's eyes stayed on Ethan, steady and fierce. "He's yours now," she said, voice breaking. "He chose you." Ethan's chest swelled, a knot of grief and gratitude unraveling. He'd come to the shelter for a dog to fill the silence, but Cade had given him purpose, a fight worth winning. The hound and Mutt bounded over, tails wagging, their trust sealed by the chaos. An officer draped a blanket over Ethan's shoulders, and he pulled it around Cade. Then the smaller dogs, a makeshift family forged in the dark. Dawn broke, painting the hollow gold, and the cruiser rolled away, poachers cuffed in the back. Ethan stood, Cade at his side, and opened the cabin door wide. "This is home," he said, voice rough but sure. Cade bounded inside, tail wagging furiously, claiming the rug like he'd always belonged. The hound and Mutt followed, sniffing corners, their fear melting into curiosity. Lila lingered on the porch, a faint smile breaking through. "You gave him back what they stole," she said, then turned to go, her own healing begun. Ethan sank onto the couch, surrounded by his pack, and let out a breath he'd held all night. The climax was over, the mystery solved. Cade's bravery had saved them all. Ethan ran a hand through Cade's fur, feeling the heartbeat beneath, and knew they'd triumphed together. The cabin glowed with morning light, a sanctuary reclaimed, and Cade's amber eyes met his, calm and whole. They weren't just survivors, they were home. Morning sun spilled across the Tennessee Hollow, warming the cabin's porch where Ethan Cole sat, a mug of coffee steaming in his hands. Cade sprawled beside him, his scarred coat glinting gold, amber eyes half closed in contentment. The hound and Mutt, now dubbed Scout and Ember, romped in the yard, their barks a joyful chorus weaving through the dew-soaked grass. Ethan smiled, whole again. The silence he'd once fled now softened by the clatter of paws and the steady heartbeat at his side. 3 days had passed since the storm, since Cade's courage turned a lonely night into a triumph, and the jagged edges of Ethan's past felt smoother, mended by a bond he hadn't seen coming. He'd grown in ways he couldn't have imagined. The man who'd buried his heart with a war dog named Jax had faced poachers and a raging creek, all for a German shepherd labeled unlovable. Cade had taught him trust wasn't loud. It was patient, fierce, a flame that burned through fear. Ethan ran his fingers through Cade's fur, marveling at the scars that told a story of survival, not defeat. The shelter had called him a threat, but he'd proven them wrong, not just by escaping but by saving others, by saving Ethan. Scout and Ember bounded up, nuzzling his hands, their trust a gift forged in chaos. Ethan laughed softly, the sound bright and free, a melody he'd forgotten he knew. They'd found each other, not in a kennel or a storm, but in the quiet after, where love bloomed like wildflowers in the hollow. Cade lifted his head, nudging Ethan's knee, and their eyes met. Steady, certain, a promise kept. The world beyond buzzed with their tale, but here, it was simple. A man and his pack, whole and unbroken. Ethan leaned back, Cade settling closer, and knew they'd built something lasting. They'd triumphed together, and that was enough, more than enough, for a lifetime of second chances. Ethan wouldn't have found Cade or saved Scout and Ember without that leap into the storm. His paw prints led him through the dark, a trail of courage that turned a lonely Marine into a hero for a pack that needed him. What about the viewers out there? Would they have followed those tracks, trusting a dog labeled aggressive to show them the way? The comment section waited below, eager for their stories. What's the bravest thing they'd do for a furry friend? Run through a tempest? Face down danger? Or simply open their heart to a shelter dog others overlooked? Every tale mattered, just like Cade's, and Ethan's porch wouldn't feel the same without knowing what moved them too. This story of a German shepherd who defied the odds deserved to reach every soul who believed in second chances. Viewers could hit that like button if Cade's bravery stirred their hearts. Let's send those thumbs up soaring. Subscribing to the channel promised more gripping, heartwarming dog adventures. Tales of loyalty and love that'd keep them glued week after week. Ethan and Cade's journey proved no dog was too broken to change a life, and sharing this video could light that spark for someone else. They could send it to a friend who'd brave a storm for their pup, or a family member needing a lift, because when they did, they weren't just watching. They were helping every dog find their Ethan, their home.